He was just a janitor at headquarters. No one listened when he suggested a new route for the tank column. But what happened after his map was dismissed as nonsense forced the generals to rewrite the textbooks. Let me ask you something. What happens when the smartest guy in the room ain't the loudest, the rank-holding, or the most decorated, but just a quiet kid with a pencil and a bad seat in the chow line? Let me tell you what happens. They ignore him, laugh at him, push him down the list. And when the smoke clears, they pretend they never heard his warning. That kid's name was Langston Fisher, private, first class. Born and raised in a 2-room house in Selma, Alabama, with more cracks in the walls than bread in the kitchen. He got drafted with the rest of us. Thin, quiet, always drawing something on napkins, crates, helmet liners. Not cartoons. Terrain. Yeah, terrain. That's what started this whole damn thing. It was late December '44. The kind of winter that freezes your socks stiff if you sleep too long. We were stationed near a nowhere Belgian village called WWII. No taverns, no broads, just trees and mud. And the trees, they didn't whisper like trees. They watched. You could feel it. That hush before something terrible. Langston had just come back from patrol 2 nights earlier. Nothing special. 5 men out, 5 men back. But while the rest were trading jokes and coughs over black coffee, Langston was sitting on a ration box, sketching something with a broken pencil and a serious face. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was always like he skipped the small stuff. Went straight to the point. "You know that hill to the east? The tree line's not where it's marked," he said one morning, handing me a makeshift map. "And the ravine we crossed? It's deeper than they have it, like a funnel. If tanks move through there, we won't see 'em till they're on us." I stared at the sketch, tight, clean, methodical. Not officer work. "Better. You tell the CO?" I asked. He nodded. "Sergeant Myers said, and I quote, 'Leave the maps to the grown-ups, Fisher.' We both knew what that meant. The official maps we'd been handed looked like they were made from memory and wishful thinking. They didn't match the land, not really. Langston's did. He stayed up late that night, drawing more. Elevations, cover lines, blind turns. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was trying to help. That's the part that still stings. He meant well, and the Army crushed that under a muddy boot like it was a bug on a mess tray. Next morning, Sergeant Myers called Langston into the comms tent. I stood close enough to hear through the canvas wall. "You think you know more than the Corps of Engineers now?" Myers barked. "No, sir," Langston said flat. "I just think our position's exposed, and that's enough. You want to play draftsman, Fisher? Fine. You can start by sweeping the latrines. If I catch you drawing another line on anything but a cleaning schedule, we'll talk reassignment." A few guys laughed outside. Not all of them meant it cruel, but nobody stood up either, including me. And that's something I still carry. Langston walked out slow, rolled up map still in his hand. Didn't rip it, didn't drop it, just tucked it into his shirt like something worth keeping. That day, command ordered a mock readiness drill. We had to rotate squads eastward, dig temporary foxholes, simulate retreat scenarios. All part of winter maneuver adaptation. Sounds impressive, huh? What it really meant was marching 3 miles in snow and pretending it was training, all while ignoring the damn terrain warnings from the only man who actually studied it. Langston wasn't part of that drill. They had him moving crates. But when we got to that ravine, the one he marked in red pencil, It was exactly what he said. A blind funnel, no visibility. Too narrow for trucks. Too quiet. And yet, the orders were to set up camp right there. So we did. That night, Langston came to me during watch shift. "I can't sleep," he said. I nodded. "Because we're camping in a bowl and hoping nothing rolls downhill." He half smiled. "Because no one thinks it matters." He handed me a folded map, hand-drawn, coffee-stained, creased like a letter from home. "If they come, it'll be from here," he pointed. "Mark my words." I stuffed it into my coat. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Because the look in his eyes, it wasn't fear. It was that dead calm look of a man who's already told the truth once and seen what it cost. Next morning, after the drill ended, we marched back to base cold, tired, and unshaken. Nothing happened, not a single shot fired. So what do you think happened? They used that silence to humiliate him harder. Captain Wilcox, the kind of man who looked like he was born in a regulation uniform, called Langston out during chow, loud enough for the whole tent to hear. "Fisher, got any new theories for us today? Maybe the trees are out of order again?" Some of the boys laughed. A few glanced away. Langston didn't answer, just kept stirring his soup. Then Wilcox leaned in. "Here's a theory. Maybe you should keep your head down and your hands empty, Private. The enemy is not looking for cartographers." Langston met his eyes, didn't blink, didn't speak. And I remember thinking, you can only push a man so far before he stops being quiet and starts being dangerous. That night, I found Langston sitting near the ammo crates, alone. Snow drifted soft over his boots. "You ever think maybe they want to be blind?" he asked. I didn't answer. "Maybe it's easier. If they pretend they don't know, they don't have to be responsible when the ground opens up under us." I sat down beside him. Cold bit through the layers. "What are you going to do?" I finally asked. He shrugged. "What I always do. Pay attention." The next morning they gave him a new assignment. Inventory control. No more patrols. No more maps. Just numbers. Crates. Silence. But he kept drawing. Late at night. Small, folded, hidden. Like he was writing letters to a future that might still listen. And while Command tried to erase him from the front line, we started carrying his sketches folded in our breast pockets. Not because we were defying orders, but because deep down every one of us knew. The only man telling the truth out here wasn't wearing bars. We're just getting started. What came next flipped everything we thought we knew. And trust me, you do not want to miss what's about to hit. They thought moving him to supply would quiet him down. No more maps, no more patrols, no more of that uncomfortable truth buzzing around the barracks like a wasp behind glass. Just boxes, clipboards, silence. Problem is, silence never stopped a man like Langston Fisher. It just gave him time to sharpen the pencil. They stuck him in a tent behind the main line. Supply depot 4, tin roof, canvas walls, 3 light bulbs. 2 dead, 1 flickering like it owed someone money. That place smelled like rust and boiled socks. Cold in the morning, damp by lunch, forgotten by sundown. That's where they sent him. That's where they thought he'd disappear. Langston didn't vanish. He watched. He watched the patrols. He watched the trucks. He watched the way the engineers laid out defensive lines, like they were building a sidewalk in Kansas, not prepping for a blitz. And then, one night, he heard it again. That sound. You don't forget it once you know it. Tanks. Heavy ones, treading slow. like a steel animal trying not to wake the trees. Langston stood at the edge of the depot, hand on the tent flap, eyes scanning the dark. Frost in his breath, spine straight, not a muscle moving except his ears. I found him an hour later sitting cross-legged in the supply tent, drawing on the back of an ammo manifest. "You hear it?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah," I said. "Northwest, low ridge." He nodded, exactly where I marked it 3 weeks ago. His voice wasn't bitter, wasn't angry. It was cold, flat, like a man reading back his own eulogy. I looked at what he was sketching. Another map. This one smaller, tighter, like a code, like a warning in a bottle. "Lang," I said. "They already buried the last one." He paused. "Doesn't matter. Somebody's gotta know, even if it's just you and me. We tried again, not through the officers. We knew better." This time Langston handed the sketch to Corporal Dean. Motor pool guy, honest, steady hands. Dean passed it to Sergeant Ross. Ross gave it to a runner heading toward command. We watched it move like a hot secret through cold hands. And then, nothing. Next morning, Langston was ordered to report to Captain Wilcox. Again. This time not in the open, behind closed tent flaps. He came back with a black eye and a busted lip. Didn't talk about it, didn't need to. The message was clear: draw another line and we'll erase you for good. But the ground didn't care about politics. It remembered the map. And so did the tanks. January 3rd, 0500 hours, fog thick like soup you could chew. A squad was running recon up near the east slope, the very slope Langston had circled over and over. They didn't come back. Radio went dead by 0600. At 0630, artillery started. Not drills, not warnings. Shells, then gunfire, then trees, splitting like matchsticks. And right where Langston said it would happen, German armor poured through a ravine no one was watching. No one except the kid with the pencil. We scrambled. Everyone. Boots half-tied. Ammo belts slipping. Half the men didn't even have their rifles slung. Command panicked, issued retreat orders that contradicted each other. Platoons ended up running into enemy fire trying to follow 2 different maps. One lieutenant started yelling coordinates from a hilltop, then caught a shell that turned the hilltop into a crater. You ever seen a unit turn to smoke in under an hour? I have. Langston. He didn't run. While everyone else grabbed rifles or radios, he grabbed his map. Not the one they issued. His. He ran to the machine gun team holding the fallback trench and dropped the sheet in front of them. "Hold here," he shouted, jabbing a finger at the bend, "and set a trap here. They'll swing wide. They always swing wide." The gunner, stunned and shaking, looked to his sergeant. "Follow it," the sergeant said. "I don't care whose name's on the paper. That's the first damn thing all day that makes sense." They followed it, and it worked. They turned that bend into a bottleneck, a death alley. Every tank that rolled into it got jammed, blocked, hit with anti-tank rounds from a side angle nobody thought to cover. Except Langston. He wasn't on the field roster, but that morning, every shell that hit where it needed to came from his lines. By 1100 hours, the ground stopped shaking. The ridge went silent. One last tank burned halfway in the tree line. German infantry backed out slow, retreating, limping, dragging what was left. It wasn't a victory speech moment. Nobody cheered. Just silence, cold air, and a map on the snow, soaked, burned at the edge, but still readable. Captain Wilcox walked through the aftermath with a look like someone slapped him with his own insignia. He saw Langston standing by the trench, his uniform muddy, eyes calm, arms folded like a man who just ran out of ways to be ignored. They stared at each other. No salute, no apology. Just two men who knew exactly what had happened. That afternoon, a staff car pulled up from Division HQ. Rumor was they wanted to commend the unit for defensive ingenuity. Nobody said Fisher's name, but you can bet that map made it to someone's desk, just without the signature. Langston, he didn't say much, just packed his things quietly when the reassignment papers came. Different front, new sector, further east. He handed me the last map he drew, folded twice, corner torn, written in pencil. "Keep it," he said, "not because they'll believe it, but because you will." This was the breaking point. The system cracked, and the man they tried to erase put himself in the middle of fire and proved them all wrong. What comes next is not a reward. It's a reckoning. Would you believe that a simple soldier with a pencil could change the course of the war? If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe. On this channel, we bring up forgotten but truly powerful stories from World War II, where fate was decided not by generals, but by ordinary people. Write in the comments. Would you risk going against orders if you knew you were right? I'll never forget that man's face. Lieutenant Harrow, pale, nervous, with that twitch in his eye that told you he hadn't slept in days. He was too clean to be in this mud pit, too soft to be leading men through hell. But he was the first officer who didn't look at me like I was just another problem with skin the wrong color. He walked into my tent after midnight, holding a map tube under one arm and a crumpled pack of matches in his hand. "I heard you've been drawing," he said, voice tight like he was chewing every word. "Can you do elevation, terrain curvature?" I looked up from the field stove I'd rigged from a busted mess tin. "I can draw whatever you need, Lieutenant, but nobody's interested in a map that doesn't come from the Ivy League." That was the first time I saw it. Not pity, not doubt, but fear, real fear in an officer's face. "They're sending a whole unit of Shermans through a valley tomorrow," he said, placing the map tube down like it was carrying live explosives. "HQ says it's clear. I flew over it today. There's no way those tanks make it out." I unrolled the aerial photos and traced the ridgeline with my finger. Ravines on both sides, no exit routes. Ambush country. You didn't need a Harvard degree to see it. You just had to not be blind. He handed me the matches. "You draw me a new route, one they won't look at. Something ugly, off the books." I didn't ask questions, just grabbed my pencils, laid out my compass, and went to work under the weak yellow flicker of a single tent lamp. Dirt smudged the edges of the paper. Sweat made the ink bleed. But by dawn I had a route, longer, riskier, but not a slaughterhouse. He took it without a word and walked out. I didn't expect to hear anything after that. Probably figured he tossed it the moment he left. Wouldn't be the first time someone asked for help just to shut their own conscience up. But the next night, the mess tent was quieter than usual. No one shouting, no stories, just tired chewing and glances that didn't linger. Then someone muttered, "Sherman's made it through. Whole battalion. Didn't lose a single one." No one looked at me, but Harrow passed behind my bench and dropped something on my tray. Another crumpled pack of matches. No words, just that. It would have ended there. Should have. But the enemy doesn't like to be humiliated. 3 days later, a German scout plane went down near the ridge I'd rerouted them around. Inside the wreckage, maps. Our maps. The original ones with my route drawn in red pencil, circled, notated, with a stamp I'd never seen before. Somebody had leaked it. And that's when I realized something no one wants to believe. Even when you save lives, even when your maps win battles. Some men only see a threat when your name's at the bottom of the page. They were coming, not just the Germans. And next time, they'd be aiming at me. They sent a captain to commend me the next morning. He shook my hand with one and passed me a sealed envelope with the other. Inside wasn't a medal. It was an order and a warning. I had 3 hours to disappear, or be court-martialed for espionage. And just like that, I went from hero to traitor. But the real betrayal hadn't even started yet. They wanted us to die that morning. I knew it from the second I heard the sound of tanks in the fog, our own tanks, finally rolling in after days of delay. But by then, the Germans already knew. They were waiting, and someone in our command had handed them the map. That map. My map. We had crawled through half-frozen marshes, slept under trees with frost-bitten fingers, followed that cursed route I drew with every step. And now, instead of catching the Germans off guard, we were marching straight into the barrel of their ambush. "You hear that?" Harris whispered next to me, rifle trembling in his hands. "I hear it," I said, stomach turning. The boom came seconds later. A shell ripped through the tree line and threw a Sherman sideways, flames licking up the turret before anyone inside could scream. Then another and another. We hit the dirt as metal roared over us. My breath caught in my throat. I watched my own plan being torn to pieces. The turns, the timing, the terrain, it was perfect. But they knew. Every move we made, they'd predicted it. "Get off the road," someone screamed, but it was already too late. Snipers opened fire from the ridge. Mortar shells fell like thunder. The map was in my jacket. I didn't need to look at it. I could see it burned into my memory. And all I saw now was how perfect a trap it had become. I saw Wilson go down. I saw Brower, quiet, steady Brower, take a bullet to the neck and fold like a sack of flour. And I saw something worse. Lieutenant Groves, the one who told me not to talk back, just standing there, frozen, watching his plan unravel. I tackled him to the ground as a shell took out the tree behind us. "You son of a bitch," I growled in his ear. "You stole it." He didn't deny it, didn't even look shocked. "Orders," he said through bloody teeth. "I followed orders." "Whose?" I shouted. "Whose orders?" Another blast. Dirt rained down. Groves was crying now, not for the dead boys, not for the map, but because the trap he walked us into was closing in on him. We had to move. What was left of our unit was scattered, confused, pinned down by the very hill I said we should avoid. I remembered every line I drew, every elevation I warned about, every field I said to skip. I grabbed the radio off a dead comms corporal and hissed into it. "This is Private Carter. If you're alive, listen to me. Follow my voice. We're cutting left, back into the marsh." No one responded, but I moved anyway. And to my left, one by one, others started crawling after me. 8 of us made it. Then 12. Then 19. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for orders. I led. We didn't head toward the objective. We headed under it. Around the ridges, through freezing water, past a German patrol I told them would be there 2 days ago. But no one believed me. We circled the entire fight. And at dawn, when the shelling finally slowed and the smoke drifted east, we climbed the ridge from the other side and saw hell. Shermans burning, Groves missing, bodies everywhere. But we also saw something else. A German half-track, alone, idling, a radio antenna still twitching. I pointed at it and said, "We get that. We get the truth." Rogers, quiet, farm boy Rogers, ran ahead and cut down the last 2 soldiers guarding it. We stormed the vehicle, and inside I saw it. Pinned to the wall, my map. Not a copy. Mine. Still smudged from the mud on my fingers, still torn at the edge where I crumpled it that night by the fire. They hadn't stolen the idea. They'd stolen the real thing. And someone in our command gave it to them. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. We had the proof now. We had the voice logs, the coordinates, the markings, everything. Enough to hang somebody, enough to change everything. And maybe, just maybe, enough to finally be heard. But the battle wasn't over. Because as I looked out at the field below and saw the smoke curling up from our losses, I realized they wouldn't let us walk back with that proof. They'd rather see us disappear, and I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction. What happened in the next 36 hours would never be written in any official report. But it would be remembered by every man who survived it. And by the one man who'd been silenced for too long. They flew me back to Fort Sam like I was somebody. I kept expecting someone to tell me it was all a mistake, that the man who sat in that command tent, holding back a battalion with a pencil and 2 broken fingers, didn't really exist, that he was just a rumor, a tale made up by scared men to keep hope alive. But the man existed, and the army couldn't hide that anymore. When I stepped off the plane, they had a stretcher ready. But I walked off, limping, bloody bandage still wrapped around my thigh, fingers and splints. But upright, alive, and I swear for the first time people saw me. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and polished brass. They sent generals, not doctors. Brass with smooth shoes and hands that had never touched mud. One of them handed me a citation for valor. The ink wasn't even dry. Another said my innovative battlefield cartography would be taught in officer schools. I asked him what they were going to teach. How to get ignored, insulted, and then nearly killed by your own chain of command before anyone listens. He didn't answer. He just patted my shoulder and left. But the one that mattered was waiting at the end of the hallway. Old Sergeant McClure. They brought him in from the ward when he heard I was back. "Oh, you drew that map," he said. "No salute, no formality. You drew that damn map and saved 100 boys." I nodded. Couldn't speak. He just smiled, sat down beside my bed, and told me something I'll never forget. "They sent you to push a mop. You rewrote a war. 2 weeks later, they offered me a desk job at the Pentagon. Mapping analysis, they called it. I told them to shove it. I went home instead, quietly. No parade, no fanfare, just a duffel bag and a bus ticket to Louisiana. I opened a little print shop off a dirt road near Lafayette. Made signs, blueprints, flyers. Sometimes drew wedding invitations by hand for folks who couldn't afford fancy ones. People thought I was just a quiet man with a limp and a gentle voice. But every time I held a pencil, I remembered the mud, the column, the tanks, the way the land had spoken to me like it knew the lives riding on every turn, every hill, every soft patch of dirt, like the earth trusted me to get it right. One morning, 20 years later, a boy came into my shop. ROTC cadet. Tall, serious, said he was writing a paper on battlefield logistics, and heard a crazy story from a retired major about a janitor who mapped a route through German territory. I listened, quiet, then asked, "You think a janitor could do that?" He said, I think a man who's underestimated long enough eventually surprises everyone. I just smiled and handed him a folded piece of paper from the drawer. A map. The one from that night. Still stained with oil and mud, laminated now to hold its shape. "Then tell him this," I said. "Tell him the army forgot something. Maps don't care about rank. Only about who sees what others don't." And as he walked away, holding the paper like it was scripture, I felt it again. The weight of a war I'd never meant to fight, but somehow helped win. Not with a gun, not with orders, but with eyes wide open and a pencil that didn't know how to lie. I stared at the commander's face, waiting, his lips pressed tight, brows furrowed like he was chewing on every word I'd just dropped in his lap. For a minute, I thought he might punch me or throw me back into the mud with the tanks. But then, without lifting his head, he said, "You're telling me you mapped it by walking it?" I nodded. "Yes, sir. I had to feel the ground with my feet. Your tanks aren't getting stuck because of German sabotage. It's the creek beds. They don't show on any of your recon maps. But I saw them, felt them. They're dry on the surface, but underneath it's like soup." He stood, circled the table, and looked out at the dusk light burning behind the tents. Then he muttered, almost to himself, "You think this map of yours can get us through?" I didn't flinch. "I know it can." There was silence, long enough to feel my heartbeat in my teeth. Then he called in the radio operator. "Get me Captain Rawlings, now." Within 20 minutes, I was sitting at a folding table across from two men I'd never met before, both of them higher rank than I'd ever stood next to. My map was laid out flat, smoothed by my own hands, with my crooked little notations running alongside the safe lines I'd sketched out over 3 nights of insomnia and mosquito bites. Rawlings traced a finger along the penciled route. "This avoids the creek beds." "Yes, sir," he kept tracing. "And these bypasses?" "Cleared. I walked them myself. That's where you can get heavy armor through. Not fast, but safe." Rawlings looked at the other officer. They didn't say a word to each other, just nodded. Then he looked back at me. "You're riding in the lead tank. We move at dawn." My mouth went dry. "Sir, I'm not a—" "You're the only man who's seen this with his own eyes. You lead. That's an order." The next morning I was jammed inside the turret hatch of an M4 Sherman, map in hand, eyes scanning every turn like a hawk on rails. Every time the tank rumbled forward and didn't sink, my heart did a backflip. Behind me, 24 other tanks crawled forward like cautious dogs sniffing a minefield. At one point, we passed the site where the last convoy had been lost. The remains were still there, twisted metal hulks half swallowed by mud. That image alone nearly shattered my confidence. But then I heard it. The voice of the driver calling back to me. "You sure, Private?" I looked at the map. I looked at the trees. I looked at the sun. Yes, we're right. We made it, all of us. 34 tanks and over 100 infantry rolled through the kill zone without a single loss. No one got bogged down. No one had to radio for tow cables or dig teams. When we crested the ridge and saw the valley spread out below, untouched and green, the cheer that went up inside those tanks was something I'll never forget. That night, they handed me a silver star. But I didn't pin it on. Not right away. I was still thinking about the first time I showed them that map, how they laughed, how they rolled their eyes when I told them it came from walking the woods with a piece of charcoal and 2 broken shoelaces. I was still thinking about the guys buried in that mud 2 weeks ago. The real map wasn't the one they pinned on the wall. It was the one etched into the soles of my boots, soaked in blood and sweat. And as they shook my hand, all I could think was, all that, just because they let a janitor draw.